Well, hi, everybody. I know people are still logging in, but I don't want to waste time since we only have an hour. So I want to go ahead and get started and welcome everybody. So hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for Race in the PR Classroom, Navigating the Agency, presented by the Institute for Public Relations. Tina, where are you? Wave to everybody. Tina, there you are. And the PRSA Educators Academy. My name is Dean Mundy. I am the immediate past chair of the Educators Academy and the PR director at the University of Oregon School of Journalism. Today, we'd like to welcome our panelists, if you wouldn't mind waving as I introduce you, and then I'll turn it over to Tina after I go through some ground rules. Today, we'd like to welcome our panelists, Dr. David Marshall, Professor and Chair for the Department of Strategic Communication at Morgan State University. Helen Shelton, Senior Partner and Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Finn Partners. And Kadri Lehman, Media Strategic for Editorial and Media Strategies at Edelman. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you just of a few housekeeping rules, the same as we've had in months past. This is a Q&A type forum, so to ask a question, you can either type it in the chat or virtually raise your hand with the feature at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to ask a question anonymously, please type the message to the host in the chat and we'll read your question aloud, and only the moderators are able to see your question. If you are tweeting about today's discussion, please use the hashtag RPRC. And the discussion is being recorded and will be available for playback on the IPR website. We'll also send you an email when it's ready, and we'll collect the resources. So please feel free to put resources in the chat and we'll share those resources as well. Please remain respectful to our host and others on the call by muting yourself at all times unless you want to speak or ask a question. And lastly, if you would like to participate in the Race in the PR Classroom series, or if you have a topic you're interested in, please reach out to me, Dean Mundy, or Tina at IPR. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tina McCorkindale, President CEO of the Institute for Public Relations, who will moderate today. Tina, take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks so much to our panelists for being here. So let's go ahead and kick this off. So why don't we go around and just spend a couple minutes learning about our panelists. Just tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do. Helen, why don't we start with you? Thanks for being here, Helen.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina, Dean, Sarah. It's great to see all of you. Great to be with Dr. Marshall and my new friend, Kadri. Yeah, my name is Helen Shelton. I'm a senior partner at Finn Partners. We are a global firm, full service agency where a commitment to diversity has been one of our founding principles since Peter started the firm in 2011. But I have pretty much spent my entire career working to address the sort of lack of diversity in our industry in ways that before this was even sort of a trending topic or something that was being buzzed about. So at Finn, I oversee our Actions Speak Louder initiative, and we have a 90-person DEI committee that's agency-wide, and we work across several pillars to address this issue. So, and spending time with young people and doing recruitment and education and outreach and mentorship is such a big part of what we do. So Tina, you know, we've got a long-standing relationship with you in IPR. So thank you so much for having us, and thank you for all that you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Dr. Marshall.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tina, and everyone on the line. Appreciate being here, and welcome to my fellow panelists as well. My name is David Marshall. I'm professor and chair of the Department of Strategic Communication at the illustrious Morgan State University, is what our young people call it, so I just follow suit. In the ACJMC Accredited School of Global Journalism and Communication. SCOM, as we affectionately call it, focuses largely on public relations, strategic communication, social media, and we're being urged in this, I guess, the spirit of convergence to do a lot more digital social analytics and even branching a little bit into marketing. We have about 100 students in the program, 5 full-time faculty members. I'm really pleased that for all the faculty members teaching in the core courses, by the end of this year, all of them will have PhDs and APRs. The APR and the PhD are required for tenure at Morgan in our department. I serve as a diversity consultant for a number of different organizations, particularly in the HBCU space. really active in PRSA. I've been appointed to the National PRSA Educational Affairs Committee, and locally, I've been elected president of PRSA Maryland.
Great, thank you. Kadri.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me on, Tina and Dean. It's a pleasure to share space with Helen and Dr. Marshall. My name is Kadri Lehman. I'm an earned media strategist at Edelman, where it's my job to connect our clients to the media, whether that's your traditional form like broadcast and print, or emerging technologies like streaming channels or podcasts. And so I work with a number of clients, some ranging from Fortune 500 clients to NGOs and nonprofits to tell their stories. A good amount of my work is also in multicultural communications and issues, where I bring my personal perspective and insights to the work that I bring. And so I'm really excited to sort of speak to how I've been navigating the agency and again, sharing the space with you guys on stage.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as Dr. Mundy said earlier, if you could please put your questions in the chat, or you could do the raise hand and we're happy to call on you. But this is really a discussion, and don't hesitate to ask questions, and I'll mix them in as we go. So the purpose of this panel is focused on the agency experience and how to help transition students into agencies. Because as I know most of you are aware, a lot of the students go into agencies, whether they're boutique agencies or mid-size or large agencies. So especially helping our students of color do that, because there are can be additional challenges with students when they go into agencies and they look around and people may not look like them, and trying to assimilate. So Kadri, you are a recent graduate from the illustrious Morgan State University. So why don't you, so why don't you graduate in 2018? So why don't you tell us a little bit about your transition from the classroom into an agency? What was your experience like?
Yeah, certainly. I'm happy to share. I think one thing that I'd love to sort of like speak to is maybe those last couple of months as a senior in college, and sort of like how that helped prepare me for that post-grad life. I want to impress the importance of, really making sure you have a post-grad plan in that fall semester of your senior year. So sort of like knowing what internships or jobs you want to apply for post-grad, what sort of things may you have missing from your resume that you might need, whether that's in, more volunteer experience, a study abroad experience, or so on and so forth, to help make you more competitive for the agency sort of like landscape. I graduated in May 2018, and I actually had just done an agency tour at Edelman a couple of months back. And I was of the mind at the time that, if you did an agency tour, if you were good with the folks at HR, you were guaranteed an internship. That was not the case. I interviewed for an internship and actually did not get the first internship I applied for at Edelman. It was for their digital team, but I wasn't discouraged by it. Instead, I started working full-time. I found work at luxury retail at Burberry. And then I noticed that Edelman put up another application for their internship program. I went out on a whim and I applied for it. I actually found a team that was sort of better suited for my expertise, which was sort of brand and consumer brands. And then I joined their branding team in March of 2018. I'm sorry, March of 2019. I'm getting my years mixed up. So I started that internship experience really wanting to say yes to everything, volunteer to everything, and touch as much as I could. I think the importance of these internship experiences, especially when you're working at firms that are global in reach and have so many different legs from, social, digital, traditional media, and all the different sort of legs of the communication sort of world. I think it's so important to try to get as much of it as you can. So I really wanted to take that time, whether it was going to be 3 months or 6 months, to learn as much as I could. So I made that very clear to my manager, and I started doing what I called coffees with Kadri, with a K. I'm a big fan of alliteration, where I started meeting people mostly directly close to my team that, I had a sort of like line of sight into their work, but also people who I didn't really know. I was really interested in what our digital team was doing. And so I wanted to know more about digital content. So I set up, to have coffee with members of their social content team. Additionally, I wanted to know more about video. So I set up coffee with our director of video. Eventually, through those coffees, I stopped seeing Edelman as a sort of pyramid and more of a plateau. And so I started reaching out to more senior leaders and more colleagues and started learning more about the work that people did. That really informed my internship experience and allowed me to make organic connections and relationships with folks and touch meaningful work that I would have never had the opportunity to have touched if I didn't sort of like, have a casual conversation with them first. And so that was my internship experience. I worked on consumer brands, including Hilton and Taco Bell, to name a few. There, I was doing a bit of everything. I was doing social recommendations, pitching media, doing sort of stakeholder management, executive positioning at events and conferences, and providing POV and recommendations that the clients sent over. I'm happy to say that I helped work on that Taco Bell hotel initiative, and of course, some of their planet and employee programs that they did as well. So I then actually, after 6 months of interning, and then the way the internship program was structured at that time, you would be an intern for 3 months, and after that sort of third month mark, right at that mark, they would decide whether or not they would extend you for up to 6 months. And somewhere within that 6 month time, there's the potential for a full-time opportunity if a team actually has the demand for the role. And so it was like Game of Thrones with those roles. I'll be completely candid. We were, fighting. These are the same interns that, you're working with on a day-to-day basis and sort of competing for these roles. I was luckily offered a role in our New York team on our multicultural practice, in addition to a role in our DC office on our media strategy team. And I chose our media strategy team because of the breadth and depth of the clients that I would be able to work on. That's been, the highlight of my very short life, I suppose. And it's been incredible. I feel so welcomed and so appreciated in this space. I feel as if my value is respected. One thing that I do in this role as a media strategist is, again, connect our clients to the media. And I think that what you have to be able to do to sort of do that role is sort of have your ears and eyes to do sort of news, but also to social. So I love the fact that I can, bring social insights from social media. My team will listen to them and they'll use that to inform the strategy that we give to clients. In addition to the client work that I do, I also have been really instrumental in some of our national D&I practices. Most recently, we actually hosted a 2-day summit of HBCU leaders and professionals across the country, where we sort of spoke to some of the work that we were doing at Edelman, let them know how we want to sort of build a mutually beneficial relationship with them over the next couple of years, and provided ways to sort of create a pipeline for talent to the agency. And so we're still working on building and developing that relationship. But I was super happy that I was able and afforded to work on that work since I was an intern, and have, now working on it in a full-time capacity. In addition to that, I think that one thing that I really enjoy out of my job is being able to have access to our employee resource groups. So I'm a member of our GRIO group, which is our sort of coalition of Black employees throughout our network, where we get together for, different things, whether it's intimate conversations about what's happening in the world, or, sort of like, movie and film screenings, or sort of celebratory moments. That group has been in such a safe space for me and such a resource for me during this time, especially after the events of George Floyd. And so I've been super lucky to have them and to have that group to call home, and to have other members at Edelman and other colleagues who I consider friends to help support me as well. So that's sort of my Edelman experience in a nutshell, if you will. And so sorry to ramble, but also happy to answer any questions if I didn't share anything you might be interested in.
Yes, and I'll get to Dr. Marshall and Helen in just one second, but I did want to ask you, so you were obviously extremely proactive going in. I mean, you were doing coffees with Cadre, right? And you were taking advantage of the ERGs. So if you were to counsel, like if you were to counsel other students, like going into agencies, because it's really hard if you have like thousands of, or, hundreds of interns coming in, you obviously stood out with all your work, but sort of what advice would you give on the transition? And, is it hard going from that sort of academic mindset in school to more of an agency life? Do you want to comment on that?
Certainly. So I'll answer it in two parts. One, the advice that I would give in terms of making the transition is one, make it very clear if you want to stay. You have to ask for what you want. And if you come into an internship and, you're just sort of like working, then they're just going to give you work. But if you make it very clear that you want to stay and that you want to grow here, then they will find ways to sort of make that happen. Within the first month of me interning at Edelman, I immediately said that I would like to make this a long-term opportunity, and I would like to use our weekly meetings with our check-ins to set benchmarks to make that realistic. And so I think that more than anything, making people know that you want to stay is incredibly important, and that should be sort of like the first thing. And then two, of course, trying to figure out how the structure of an agency is, how is it operating, what are the needs of the business, and how can you fit in there? How can you add value? What do you bring to the table? And so I think that can be done in a number of ways. One, just again, finding out how the business is operated. Is there a need for, a new role? And the same way you can fit in. Now, making the transition from academia, I should say, to agency was challenging, but I think that, it's challenging for any student, no matter what university you go to. And so it's the biggest thing I think that I had to sort of get used to was just the fast-paced nature of everything, the hundreds of emails and calls and, making sure that things were organized in that way. Another thing that I had to do was, learn how to sort of like manage up and make sure that, I was organized and that my timing for everything was sort of buttoned up. So I carry around this planner that I have here that keeps all of my sort of like assignments organized. I label things by when they're due, and I have a really quick and easy to-do list that I use. Additionally, I think that one thing that people need to get better at in that sort of transition is really consuming the news and really figuring out where you want to fit in sort of this communications matrix. I think that it's okay to sort of go into these internships sort of with an idea of what you want to do, but there's so much in our industry. And so being able to sort of like pinpoint a career path is really, really important. So that way you can find others who are sort of along that path as well. And you can sort of not necessarily compare your career, but see what things worked for them, what things didn't, and maybe see if you can sort of align your career with that as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Dr. Marshall, so tell us a little bit about how you help prepare your students for other than what Kadri said, but how do you help prepare your students for the agency life?
Yeah, certainly happy to do so. And again, I think we all should just have one piece of recognition here that Kadri's experience may or may not be necessarily the global experience for everybody transitioning based on his own talent, but also based on the fact that we know just from reading in the industry, research that's been done, that may or not be the global case for Black and Brown students entering the agency world. And of course, he's at a global firm of excellence, which has been a leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's no surprise here that his onboarding has been very different from what we're reading about in other types of spaces. So at Morgan, we really do what we've been doing a lot in the HBCU space for 100, 150, 160, 70 years, depending upon how old the HBCU is having candid conversations about getting Black and Brown students into the workforce and getting them ready for a workforce that has been and still is hostile to them. Now, I know some of your audience may object to the use of the word hostile, but the hostilities have changed since 1910. They're not the same hostilities. They're different hostilities in 2021. And still imagine walking into a place where you are the only Black or brown face in the room, or one of the very, very few, and there's nobody who looks like you in the C-suite. That is really sending, whether intentional or unintentionally, a communicated message that you are either not wanted, not needed, or not good enough to be there. That is a hostility that I think that students have to have a path to navigate. And so we do talk about that. And I like to talk about a lot of what I like to call revolutionaryism or reformer, the R and the R. You're going to either be a revolutionary in that workspace, or you're going to be a reformer. One gets you walked out the door in 2 weeks. I'll need to tell you which one that is. And what do you do? What is your role as a student of color in these spaces? How do you navigate it? Some of these stories are heartbreaking. You can just go to Instagram and read, and there are tons of these accounts where a Black and brown student feels that he or she has to listen to certain types of music, learn about different types of food, watch certain TV programs so that they have something to talk about in common with their colleagues at the water cooler. What is that about? And you don't see the reciprocal action from the other end to make sure that everybody in the agency is doing that type of thing in order to make the new employee feel comfortable. So we do a lot of that at Morgan. But I think there's some also lessons here very briefly for predominantly white institutions as well, in terms of transitioning to agency life in this DE&I space. When a white student gets into an agency, they just don't walk in and go, oh, there are no Black people here. They knew that from the day that they put in that application. And you have to ask them, all this good stuff that we were teaching them about DE&I in the classroom, did that occur to them as they were filling out the application to say, is this a place that mirrors my values? Is this a place that represents all of the great things that my professors have been talking about? What is my role, revolutionary reformer, in this space to make sure that I'm being an ally to the cadres or the one or two other people in that space as well. So I think on both sides, in the PWI space and the HBCU space, I think we need to have more of these candid sort of conversations there, because it's not really about talent. And we'll come to that a little bit later. Kadri had gifts and skills before Morgan met him. I know the PR people at Morgan are going to kill me. Morgan did not do that for Kadri. Kadri was talented and had gifts when he walked on the campus. So those same skills and gifts that he had innately positioned him to do well in a job function. You see what I'm saying? So I think, but the level of success is not about the skill. It is about navigating the agency, which sometimes cannot be as welcoming as we want it to be.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. And I think even some of the additional challenges is when what we're seeing in the market is that some students are, they have to sort of take what they can get in terms of positions. So it's sort of their forced exposure with some of that. So Helen, you're the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at a mid-size agency. What are you seeing particularly for students of color as they transition into agency life?
Actually, Tina, we are a large agency now. But
that's
I
right. Yes, you're over the 60 million. Is it the 60 million mark? I think that's right. Yes.
I don't need any problems with Peter. So, but yeah, no. Yeah. So in addition to, overseeing our DEI, I also run our multicultural practice. But prior to that, I actually broke the color barrier at Ruderson in the arts and culture practice. So, a lot of people talk about, oh, well, usually the Black person is in multicultural or they're doing diversity. Well, I've been blessed to do what I wanted to do in my career. So I have no shame in saying that I've done it all. And in fact, I'm very proud of the work that we do in diversity, of the multicultural, cross-cultural, whatever you want to call it, diversity work. But to answer your question in terms of, how students should be prepared, I have to give kudos to Kadri, who I literally just met. But what we try to do is encourage young people to not have this sort of turn and run mentality where, listen, I've seen it. I've done it. I've lived it. I've been the only person in the room that looks like me. But the reality is I'm happy that I look like me. I don't need to be in a room where I see other people that look like me. But what I will say is that it's on me as much as it is on other people to create a path for myself. So when I was very young, starting out in my 20s, and David Finn, was my mentor and friend. I made it my business to get to know him. He got to know me. And like what Kadri said, you sort of make your own path. You meet people, you introduce yourself to people, and you build your sort of allies in that manner. So how that translates at Finn Partners and what we do and what I do in my role is to ensure that people of color, all of our diverse, at Finn, we celebrate diversity in all of its forms. So my job is to make sure that anybody that is considered a member of a diverse community, but I feel like it's really about celebrating what we have in common, not what makes us different, is to make sure that they are welcome, make sure that they are aware that we have systems and rules in place and a zero tolerance policy when it comes to things like any type of discrimination, microaggression, whatever. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the culture that we have at Finn. And I just encourage people that are in a position to touch a young person's life, a person of color in particular, to welcome them, to have your door open or your Zoom line open, as it were, and make the effort. Because not everyone has the moxie that Kadri or I had and have. So it's on us as sort of senior people or people that are sort of already sort of arrived to make sure that we have this embracing environment. So that's the best I could tell you.
Thank you. So industry groups have talked about what is needed to help make entry into agencies and the culture more welcoming for people of color. The Diversity Action Alliance is looking at specifically numbers. Dr. Marshall, in our prep call, you had talked about how when we talk about the numbers, it's very reflective of where we are in terms of entry level rather than what we're seeing in leadership. And you alluded to that as well, where you said that you look at the leadership and it's still primarily white. And a lot of times it's also primarily male. And then Helen, you also discussed sort of the revolving door where you can bring people in and then they leave. And that has a lot to do with belonging. So can each of you talk about this challenge? What outcomes and areas do agencies need to focus on to make more of a welcoming, belonging environment? And what can professors do to help prepare students and make it better? So Helen, why don't we start with you if you don't mind?
Thanks, Tina. So in terms of what professors can do, again, and I'm not trying to be glib about this at all, it's a really rough environment out here now just because of the situation that we're in with the pandemic, with what I call the other pandemic of this heightened racial and inequality and heightened hostility. And so it's already a challenge. So for young people, particularly young people of color trying to come up in this business, I just ask the professors to help gird them and give them break down what the realities are in terms of getting into this work environment with these kinds of challenges, but also preparing them to be the best, regardless of what color they are, what background, whatever. Just give them the tools that they need to compete to be the best. And if I truly believe this, and I say this, the only way that I am leaving a job is if I want to go. I'm not letting anybody run me out of my job. I'm not letting anybody, I spoke to a young lady that I had to talk her off the ledge. She works at another agency and she's saying that her direct supervisor doesn't like her. They don't get along and whatever. And, I'm not belittling what she said, and she's true to right to have her feelings. But unless someone is breaking the law and treating you in a way that is illegal from a discrimination standpoint, you stand your ground and you make it work for yourself if that's where you want to go. So I put it on the professors to make sure the students are prepared. I put it on managers at agencies to ensure that if you don't have formalized initiatives like ERGs, or you don't have affinity groups, that you at least create opportunities for people to learn, to, get exposure to other people in the group, to not get any special treatment, but acknowledge them and acknowledge the journey and make accommodations and make a respectful environment where people do not, at the very least, everyone needs to go through unconscious bias training, which I kind of looked at sideways before, but I see now that it's important. I feel that at the agency level, everyone at the very least needs to go through that basic training, because I don't want to hear another young lady come in my office crying about what she's been through, or somebody saying something about somebody's hair, or, somebody saying something to me stupid, which is that, oh, this is so-and-so's bus when we're doing this new business pitch and you have to ride on the bus where he tells you to ride it. So I'm somebody that's, listen, I'm from Harlem. I don't take anything lightly. So I was able to handle that. But a young person, like a cadre, well, not cadre, he could handle it, but somebody young and coming up in the business wouldn't know what to do. So that's my answer. Agencies, go through the training, understand what you should and should not say. And whether you want to be a racist or not, your agency needs to have a zero tolerance policy that at your agency, that needs to stay at your house. Do not bring it at the agency house. And for the students, it's on you to make your way. Do not let anybody turn you around or keep you out of having a rewarding career. This young man has inspired me. This is a career that is sweet. And there are people out here that don't want you to have access to that. When you are doing well in the agency business, you can make money, you can get notoriety, you can have an impact on people's lives, which is what I've tried to do in my career. So people may want to block you from having that same experience. So stay the course and make a way for people so that everybody feels comfortable and welcome and able to do their job.
Thank you, Helen. Dr. Marshall?
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit on Helen again, because what we often hear a lot in this HBCU space is this whole idea of preparedness. I think that is, and this has nothing to do with Helen, but I keep hearing it as if HBCU students are not prepared.
No, that's not what I'm saying,
No,
Dr.
I'm not
Marshall.
saying to you, but my point is to use the word in the context of HBCU, I think is a challenge. Not every student, let's just be clear, white students who get into these agencies, it's not all about preparedness. It's about the pathway, and it is the connect. That those things are not afforded in the same way that they are to HBCU students. I was at a recruiting trip with the dean in New York, our dean of SGJC, at a major global firm. And the VP for HR said literally in February, they get on a plane, they go to this certain school, they ask the dean for their best 3 students, and they fly back with those 3 students. Nothing wrong with that, because the school has an international reputation. There's no problem with that. But then I asked, do you also fly to Spelman, Hampton, Howard, or Morehouse and ask for theirs? And that becomes really the problem. The second thing I want to say is that, yes, Kadri has a great degree of moxie. Truth be told, Kadri had a big fight before he was about to graduate, because he wanted to do something, I wanted to do something big, and he won clearly because he's graduated, right? And everybody's not like you, Helen, for sure. So, and I think for a young person, all young people, and I want to encourage all of us to remember back when we were 18, 19, and 20, not everybody has that sort of thing. So
No.
the responsibility is not on the employee coming in, especially if you are in an industry where you are the people that have the problem. Black and brown kids are not the problem. You are making money. You're making fabulous money, and oftentimes serving clients that are largely Black and brown, and you don't do the courtesy of the business critical piece of having a Black and brown team
Absolutely.
to have that. So again, I like to take the focus off of the Black and brown kids. You know who needs the help? The CEOs need the help. The
No, I
HR
get that,
people,
David, but she asked,
let me
what
finish.
could the
The HR
students do?
people
Oh, sorry.
need the help. These DE&I committees at these agencies, they need the help. 5 years in and the numbers are still not moving. So again, I think that has got to be where we start in terms of the mentoring, the cultural sensitivity to get their house in order, so that any young person, no young person in this country should feel out of place coming even in a highly competitive environment. Yes, they gotta perform, they gotta keep up with the class, but I would say that's most young people who live and breathe the thing. And I don't want there to be this sense that somehow something different has to happen for the HBCU student coming in to these environments, especially when the problem rests with the agencies, which are largely non-diverse and mostly male and white.
Yeah, well, I wasn't even thinking of it just in the context of HBCUs. I'm just saying in general, because unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I did not go to an HBCU, but I still feel very strongly that the onus also has to be on students to understand that you have a right to be and work where you want to go. And there are systems and things in place for you and resources for you, regardless of where you went to school or where you didn't go to school. You have to have a sense of you're going to be okay, and you have to build your team and build your resources and build your infrastructure around you, so that whether you're in that agency from 9 to 5 or whatever, maybe it's your sorority or your fraternity, maybe it's PRSA, maybe it's your church, maybe it's the NAACP Whitney M. Young Fellowship. I don't know, but it is hard. It's very hard. It's very difficult. But again, if this is the path that people want to take, it's not going to be an easy path. And you have to have the wherewithal and the strength of purpose and the conviction to stay the course. And if the agency that you're at, it's difficult or they're treating you very bad, nobody is saying that you have to stay someplace where, you're sick and it's horrible. But we're always going to have this conversation. If people are like, well, I'm the only one that looks like me, let me go. I wish that somebody would have told me that I needed to leave being the only Black person, the youngest, only, and first Black person to become an executive vice president at the whitest division at Ruder Finn, which was the arts and culture practice. I'm working at the Getty Center with Richard Meyer, the world's leading architects and artists, and I'm walking with them and talking to them, leading press trips. And so if somebody would have told me, well, Helen, you know what, you're the only, I wouldn't have left. And I use my position to bring in other people that look like me, and also to encourage other young people of color to consider careers in cultural marketing and PR. That's the only way around this thing. We can't keep having the conversation of, well, nobody looks like me. Nobody looks like us, because sometimes we don't stay and we don't fight.
Yeah, except the problem is it's not the white kids leaving. Why is it the Black kids, the Black and brown kids?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. We should not leave.
So again, they're equally talented. And I think, and let me tell you why they're leaving. It's what I call like money, metrics, and repercussions. At many places, and your agency, Edelman, may be radically different, and they may be leaders in the field. But for the most part, you will find when you talk to some of these CEOs, there is no money in the budget for a DE&I effort. Programs cost money, especially when you're developing new business practices there. Nowhere in the budget, we would never in 1,000 years not put gas and electric in a corporation's budget. Not there, or the money that they have is so minuscule, even for training for the existing staff. Metrics, there is no other place in agency life to tell me that numbers don't matter. So if I'm the head of new business and I'm not bringing in any new business, or I'm not getting up billable hours, guess what happens to me? They walk me out the door in 2 weeks because my numbers are not moving. But in diversity, equity, and inclusion, the numbers can remain static. And that's my third letter, repercussions. Everybody keeps their job. Nobody gets demoted. In fact, you go from the C-suite to the board. So I'm saying until such time as these companies take responsibility and that there are actual repercussions for not meeting metrics, not having an inclusive environment, stopping the exit of Black and brown faces, are we going to continue to have this? Because again, I'm glad, Helen, you have the moxie. I can tell you, Cadre.
I'm not the only one. It's
Cadre, he will stand and fight an army. He is unmovable. But that's not the common experience, and nor should that have to be the common experience for Black and brown kids who are trying to break into agency life, who almost all of them, on their websites today have this thing plastered about DE&I. I'm just saying, do the talk, walk the talk. If you are about DE&I and you're interested in bringing these young people in, partner with schools, partner with professors about getting them in. But again, let's stop this thing about talent, drive, and that kind of thing when we know other people have opportunities and access just because of their privilege.
No,
All right,
I think
let's Kadri, yes.
Yeah, I think it's so important just to recognize both of your points. Obviously, agencies have to do so much more to make sure that they're fostering safe spaces and, for, talent, and making sure that they're actively looking for that talent, and looking for that talent in the same way that they would look for talent at any other university. And additionally, students have to be prepared to meet the challenge for an agency. But I think that agencies, it falls largely on agencies. And I think that there are three things that agencies have to do or can do to sort of help that. One, while they're already in there, is, create a safe space where employees can bring their most honest self. I need to know that I can talk about what I watched on TV last night, and it'll have just as much, relevancy as, a conversation about a TV show or album that somebody else listened to. I need to know that, my values, my assumptions, my beliefs, my expectations about the world we live in and how it should look or operate are respected and valued. And that can be done through, employee resource groups, through conversations, through sort of, copies, luncheons, and sort of social activities as well. I think the second thing is being able to know that, like, if I'm going to work here, if I want to make this place a home, that there is that I'll be able to move from my, twin size bed to a king size bed. Are there promotions here? Is there a clear career path here? Do I see myself in, C-suite, leadership? Is there a clear talent pipeline here? I think that being able to see yourself in those people is what's really inspiring. Me personally, I'm able to see mid-level staff. I'm obviously very inspired by, Trish Smith and our US COO, Lisa Ross, and to sort of see Lisa Ross come from our DC office president, our DC office being one of the leading offices in our network, which prompted her, being promoted to COO. It was very inspiring for me to know that she, went from another agency, came to Edelman and was only, aiming to be the president of this office, and then got promoted. And then that appears in a number of ways in mid-level, roles as well. But I try to speak to some of our sort of more notable names so you can sort of reference that. And then lastly, I think professional development is so critical, knowing that companies are going to invest in what you want to do. I personally am a big fan of personal development and have been lucky to have Edelman pay for conferences and events for me to attend, and have had the pleasure to make some really meaningful connections in that way. And before COVID happened, I'm a very, very major fan of fashion, and that's one of my passion points. For to learn that they were interested in sending me to, Condé Nast conferences around fashion and Vogue, even though I had no fashion clients on my roster, really showed that they were willing to sort of like pour into me and sort of like make me sort of like a more informed practitioner and lean in on my strengths. And so I think that, again, having a safe space where people can call themselves, and be themselves, having that sort of clear path to promotions or clear career paths. And then lastly, professional development are all things that people can do to sort of retain that talent. And then interestingly enough, I don't think there's a lot that universities can do to prepare students, but I will say that the multicultural media practice is burgeoning and it's booming. And I think that every HBCU student should be able to speak to, and not HBCU students, but also students who didn't attend HBCUs, speak to how their real life may inform that work. By attending an HBCU, I didn't just attend, a school with the Black Americans. I attended schools with Africans, with Caribbeans, and with people who weren't even of the Black descent. And what I was able to do was gain a cultural competency in the nuance of the diaspora. Black Americans are not the same as Caribbean Americans. Caribbean Americans are not the same as Africans. And so learning about those different cultures honestly helps inform my multicultural strategy now. There's certain cultural nuances I would have never been able to speak to had I not gone to an HBCU. So I think that, HBCU students should be able to lean into that expertise and their shared experience, and maybe sort of like offer that as something else that they could sort of speak to in their work.
Thank you, Kadri. Yeah, I think the PWIs also need to focus on multicultural as well to get an understanding too. So I'm going to take some questions. And I'm going to try to get to all these. So one of the questions, and if anyone else wants to answer, feel free to put it in the chat. Would love to hear this. Are there efforts by schools to stay connected to recent grads to ensure they're succeeding in their next phase of life? Maybe a 3, 6, 12-month check-in that could help play a big role in helping students build that confidence muscle that Helen spoke about, sometimes having that support to discuss common challenges. So that's the question. Is there any sort of resource for students after they graduate, or is that really in the part of the agency? So anyone can answer in the chat, or I don't know if Dr. Marshall, you want to chime in or
I'm going to go first before Dr. Marshall self-promote. I'm going to go first before he self-promotes.
Okay. Oh, you just muted yourself, Kadri.
I wanted to go first before Dr. Marshall could, am I muted again? Can you hear me?
No, you're fine. We can hear you.
Before he could go and self-promote and say that Dr. Marshall and Morgan have been so good at keeping up with me personally. And I know many other students who have left the agency where we're all in like sort of like alumni group chats. So we're all very sort of aware of what's happening at the campus and, you know, get check-ins from other professors and mentors who check in on us. And I think that speaks to sort of like the intimacy that you receive at an HBCU, that education, that sort of, you know, even though they can be large, you know, class sizes, I think that each professor does a really good job of making the instruction very intimate. And so to, you know, not just only get calls from Dr. Marshall, but, you know, previous professors who aren't even at Morgan anymore really show that they took a really honest, you know, grasp on my relationship, and including Professor Dr. Smith, who's still at Morgan, who checks in very regularly on my progress. And so I still consider them mentors and like sort of like lifelong, you know, mentors. And so I think that Morgan does a really good job of making those, you know, checks.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that. I think for institutions on this call, which are ACJMC accredited or who hold the distinctive CEPR certification from PRSA, this idea of having to sort of stay connected to your alumni base and see how they're doing, I think that that is a core best practice standard. So for those of you who are doing that or not doing that, I encourage you, you know, to do that as well. But again, it's coming back again to the metric side on the agency side, and are we asking them? You know, in 2020, I onboarded globally 100 Black and brown faces. It's 5 years into their tenure. Where are they? What percentage of that 100 have we promoted? Who's gotten professional development dollars? Did we make sure that they go to conferences like Kadri is saying? That kind of metrically driven piece that companies have a moral and ethical responsibility to check in and keep those stats as well. Even when those people leave their agencies and doing exit interviews, I'm surprised at the number of Black and brown people who say, you know, HR says, you know, whatever, and then they ask, but no one really, what really happened? I mean, you can really tell me today. And what are your recommendations for fixing whatever it is that you are there? And reaching out to them even post when they left. How are you doing? Would you like to come back? I mean, we're just not seeing that type of an engagement. So Tina, to your question, I think there's a part that the university does, and like the parents, we let them go, but now they belong to the professional world. And again, let's just be clear here. This is not a nunnery or a church. People are making millions of dollars, getting rich in an industry that caters, in terms of a lot of their clients, to Black and brown people. That's the economics here, and are not employing Black and brown people to do the work where people are making profit. I think that that's a piece as well we've got to deal with. And I think a lot of that, Tina, does rest with the agency in terms of the follow-up. People who stay, people who go, people who are moving up. And if we could just get to the percentage of people who've been promoted in X number of years compared to their white counterparts, I think we would move this conversation along. And then the part that we like, the professors, the models. How is it? Why is it? So I'm not disagreeing with Helen. There could be the self, what do you call that? Self-confidence thing. What can we do to increase their sense of self, and you know, and what kind of training can we give them? And then use these models that we can teach in universities, and also partner with our agency partners to move that model along and make it a national best practice.
Great. Helen, I do want to talk about your new program because I think that's important. And we still have a couple questions. So I have two more questions I want to get in, but we also have, only like 9 minutes left. So Helen, Finn Partners just created a dedicated mentorship program for PRSSA members from HBCUs and HSIs, which are Hispanic serving institutions. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this program and your other programs?
Sure. It's just a continuation of a formalization of what we were doing without the wonderful collaboration with PRSA. So we formalized our relationship with PRSA to create our Partners for Diversity Internship Preview Program. And what that is designed to do is work specifically with minority serving institutions, Hispanic and African-American HBCUs, to literally get students in at the ground level, expose them to our executives. It's a formalized mentoring initiative. We're selecting 50 young people for this program. And in this way, it's not where we're just kind of bringing them on and, good night, Irene. It's really working with them and creating this pipeline of people for our partner and training program, which is has been noted in the industry for our efforts to address this sort of dearth of diversity in the agency business in particular. But yeah, so March 3rd and 4th is when we will decide who those 50 students are. And it's really exciting. It's going to be a combination of mentorship. It's going to be this sort of pipeline where we will be allowing them to, be amongst the first to apply to our partner and training program, and hopefully, continue and create lasting, meaningful relationships with these students, because that's what these young people need, is to know that there are people that look like me and others that look like them that they can call on, whether they decide to grow their career at Finn Partners or not. They will know that, they can call me, they can, call whomever at Finn Partners long after this program is over, and be connected. And we will stay in touch with them, and through our relationship with PRSA, we'll continue to monitor it and hopefully grow this program.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to get into lightning round because we're short on time. So 30-second answers. But I do want to get to Kara's question in the chat. And she said, can you offer advice on helping students become the reformer that you talked about, Dr. Marshall, and how she can help prepare students, she's at a PWI, help prepare them without suppressing their authentic self or compromising their values. So Dr. Marshall, why don't we start with you? 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think, and that's the tough, and I think, again, that has to be the place of values. And I keep coming back between the disconnect between what we're teaching in the class and then what our students do when they're faced with these critical decisions. And that's why I'm, when you click on, and I get it, Tina, look at this tie. I love nice things. I'm not going to deny a young person the opportunity for a job. But let's just be clear. We can't do all this Michael row the boat of shore thing in our classes, talking about the values of diversity, the values of equity, the values of inclusion. And then I, as a student, go to a place where there is none of those. Let's just be clear about that. So there's a disconnect between what we're teaching and that piece there. So, but I do think, again, I always caution people not to be the revolutionary, because you need to be within the organization in order to make it grow. And you do that by building alliances. You build that by doing what Kadri does. Kadri is surviving not because he's getting the cheerleading, he's surviving because he's doing excellent work. Do the work first. Be the best, whoever it is that you're going to be. Let there be no peer or equal to you in the room, right? And then use that power because you have value, you're adding business critical value to the company. Now you have a platform and authority to speak to some of those reforming issues about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Kadri, 30 seconds, please. You're on mute.
Can you rephrase the question again?
Sure. It was about what can people do to help be reformers as they're going in, and how to counsel students to help be reformers in their institutions, and not just students of color.
I think being honest and transparent about your experience is the most important thing. I think that oftentimes people are afraid of being sort of labeled as a complainer or difficult to work with. And I think that people need to hear those insights of your experience. And that's the only way that the there will be actual change. I can say that, you know, creating a space for listening is the most important thing. And if there isn't a constant and consistent space for listening and reform, then I think that's when you have to start wondering, like, are these calls or these for reform actually actionable? I think that additionally, like, people need to have actionable, measurable changes that can be measured. And so, you know, I think that data and stats around diversity and inclusion numbers are super, super important. Making sure that, you know, your D&I numbers aren't just saturated completely in your junior staff, you know, making sure that they're, you know, spread out throughout your organization. And then lastly, I think that another thing that sort of like students could be doing to make their experience more helpful is talking with other students at other agencies, hearing about what's happening in their experience, and sort of comparing notes. I think that, you know, it's an industry imperative to make our industry more diverse. And I don't think it falls upon one company. And I think that we need to continue having conversations like this with institutions like IPR and with agencies and organizations to sort of have a holistic way forward.
Thank you. Helen.
Well, I agree. I think that it's really about acknowledging the issue and taking action. You know, there's so many people that talk about this, and when you scratch the surface, you know, what are your numbers? So there's a lot of people that go on and on about how important it is to be committed to this, but then when you look at it, you know, their numbers aren't that great. I mean, obviously we've got a long way to go, but we acknowledge it. Anytime anybody asks, Peter's like, tell them it's 21%, 16% is in the C-suite, but we are dedicated to making that increase by at least 30% by 2022. Like I've gone on record, he's gone on record. So that's the first thing. So a lot of these people that are out here yelling and screaming about, oh, we are diverse and we have safe spaces and this and that, you know, you'll scratch the surface and they're doing all the right things in terms of the message, but the reality is that the numbers don't add up. So acknowledging the issue and taking action to address it is important. And I just want to reiterate the fact that it isn't something that's going to be resolved overnight, but it needs to be resolved. I don't want to, I love you, Tina. I love you, Dean. I love you guys, David. But I don't want to keep having these conversations every February. I want this to be something that we continue to work on and that we advance this issue so that it's not an issue, that we actually disruptivate it and make sure that this is something we are now working towards. And it's not something where we have to be like, oh, we're still behind the eight ball. It's not about maintaining, it's about exceeding the numbers, exceeding expectations, and making sure that people are welcome and able to grow their careers and not be held back because they are a person of color. It has to stop.
Okay,
I'm tired of talking about it.
Yes, definitely. All right. So very fast, because I do have to close this out. We have like 1 minute left. Very fast. I'm going to go around and ask, what is one action item that professors can take now, spring semester, to help their students prepare agency life? So Dr. Marshall.
Let's do merging the discussions between diversity, equity and inclusion, and ethics together. They're taught in two separate places, but you cannot talk about ethics and prepare young people to go into a workplace where they're also not seeing DE&I as an ethical obligation of an organization. You can do that right now in the syllabus.
Thank you. Kadri.
I'm just going to sort of piggyback off of what he said, and then additionally to lightly touch back on that point about, you know, using your multicultural expertise to your advantage. Use your personal life, personal insights to inform your work. It's the best thing about you. Be your most authentic self. It's the best thing that you can do, and you'll feel rewarded in the end when you realize that you being yourself is all that you needed all along.
Great, thank you. Helen.
Make the agencies accountable, be proactive. I know Dr. Marshall probably does this, but, you know, send letters, call the CEO's office directly and demand that when they recruit, that they come to the HBCU campuses. You know, that's what it's going to take. Obviously, the professors train the kids from an academic perspective, and the programs are wonderful, but they can also move the needle by demanding that these agencies take a look at some of these students and give them some opportunities because they deserve them.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you all to the panelists today for being here, Dr. Marshall, Kadri, and Helen. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all you who joined. We will send out the recording and resources from the chat, and you can always find the previous sessions for each month on the IPR website. Next month, the Race in the PR Classroom will be on March 18th. It is at 2 p.m. Eastern Time instead of the usual noon time. And it features David Brown of Temple University and Nairi Wright of the University of Florida. And they're going to talk about how to incorporate the Diverse Voices book, both in the classroom and in the community. Finally, we have launched, IPR has launched a 10-month Masterclass Series, and we're giving away 3 scholarships for academics. If you would like to apply for a chance to apply to go for free, send a no more than 500-word essay on why you would like to attend to Nikki Caceres at nikki@instituteforpr.org. Thank you all again, and see you next month. Have a wonderful Thursday.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Great to see everybody.
Good to see you.